So today we are diving into common quail diseases. It's something that I know a lot of quail owners are interested in, especially when trying to keep a healthy covey. And this deep dive is going to be based on a blog post called Common Quail Diseases and How to Prevent Them. It was written by Jessica Knowles, and she's a quail expert who runs a homestead called the 104 Homestead. And it was published on November 1st, 2024, on a website all about raising quail.
You know, one of the things that really surprised me when I was looking at this material to get ready for this deep dive is that quails are naturally resistant to salmonellosis.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes them so great.
Right.
They're really hardy birds.
Yeah.
And that's just one of the reasons.
Why is that, though?
It turns out that their high internal body temperature makes it difficult for salmonella bacteria to thrive.
Oh, interesting.
So it's not impossible for them to get it, but it's definitely less common compared to other types of poultry.
Okay, so it's like a natural defense mechanism.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
But good hygiene practices are still important.
Right, of course.
Especially when you're dealing with any kind of livestock.
For sure. So Jessica starts her blog post with a glossary of terms. And I'm wondering if it covers anything beyond the basics.
It does. She highlights biosecurity and quarantine, which are really important concepts for quail owners to understand.
Yep.
Biosecurity is all about preventing diseases from entering your flock in the first place. So it's like building a protective bubble around your birds.
Okay, so it's like preventative measures.
Exactly.
Gotcha. And what about quarantine?
Quarantine is about separating new birds or birds that are showing signs of illness from the rest of the flock. It's like a timeout to prevent the spread of any potential diseases.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's like when you isolate yourself if you're feeling sick to avoid getting others sick.
Right, exactly. All right, so let's get into the actual diseases now. So she covers quite a few, and she starts with aspergillosis. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Aspergillosis is a fungal infection, and it's caused by mold. And it primarily affects a quail's respiratory system. So you might see labored breathing, open mouth breathing, or even coughing in birds that are affected by this.
And I know that she also references the Merck veterinary manual in her blog post.
Yeah.
For this particular disease.
Yeah, it's a really great resource
Yeah.
for more in-depth information on all sorts of animal health topics.
Absolutely. So how do you prevent this?
One of the best ways to prevent aspergillosis is by ensuring that their bedding stays dry.
Okay.
Pine shavings are a good option for bedding material because they naturally resist moisture.
So ventilation's really important here too.
Absolutely. Good ventilation is key.
Gotcha. So she also mentions avian influenza, which is obviously a big concern for any poultry owner. What does Jessica highlight in terms of prevention for avian influenza?
Well, she emphasizes strict biosecurity measures. So this means like quarantining any new birds for at least 2 weeks, ideally a month, to make sure they are healthy before introducing them to your existing flock. Preventing contact with wild birds as much as possible.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because avian influenza can spread through the air.
Yeah.
So covering outdoor pens with wire or netting can help create a barrier.
Okay, that makes sense.
Here.
So you're just trying to minimize the risk of exposure as much as possible.
Got it.
All right. Now, I've heard botulism can be a serious issue for quail. What causes that?
Botulism is caused by a toxin that's produced by bacteria that thrives in decaying matter.
Okay.
So spoiled feed, stagnant water, even dead insects can harbor these bacteria.
Oh, wow.
And what's really scary about botulism is that it can lead to paralysis in birds.
Yeah,
So if you suspect that your quail have been exposed to botulism, quick action with an antitoxin is really important.
Wow. So that's something to really look out for. And I imagine keeping things really clean is a good way to prevent this.
Absolutely. Keeping their environment clean and checking their food and water sources regularly are crucial.
Right. Okay. Shifting gears to coccidiosis now. This is another threat that I know a lot of people are concerned about. What can you tell us about that one?
Coccidiosis is a parasitic infection that affects the digestive system.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it's quite common in quail.
Oh, no?
Yeah. You'll see symptoms like diarrhea, and in severe cases, it can even be bloody.
Wow.
And again, she references the Merck veterinary manual here as a good resource for further reading.
Okay. And so how do you prevent coccidiosis?
Well, good hygiene is paramount.
Okay.
Keeping things clean and dry, especially during humid months, is really important.
So similar to aspergillosis, a clean and dry environment is key here.
It really is.
Okay.
And she also recommends using medicated starter feed for chicks because it can help protect them during those early vulnerable stages.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
It's like giving their immune system a little extra support.
Yeah. So what's next on her list of common diseases?
Next, she discusses infectious coryza, which is a bacterial respiratory disease.
Okay.
And it can be quite nasty. Affected birds might have swollen faces, discharge from their eyes and nostrils.
Wow.
And you might even notice a foul smell coming from that discharge.
Oh, yuck.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. Overcrowding is a major risk factor for this one.
Okay.
So making sure that your quail have enough space is crucial.
So not only does overcrowding create stress, but it also just makes it easier for diseases to spread.
Exactly.
So it's all about being mindful of their environment and their space.
It is.
What are some other respiratory diseases that quail owners should be aware of?
Newcastle disease is another one. It's a serious viral infection, and it affects both the respiratory and neurological systems.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, there's often no other choice but to euthanize affected birds.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, it is, which really highlights the importance of prevention. Vaccination is key in protecting your flock from Newcastle disease.
Okay. So that's aspergillosis, avian influenza, botulism, coccidiosis, infectious coryza, and Newcastle disease. Are there any other respiratory diseases that she mentions?
Yeah, she also discusses quail bronchitis, which is another highly contagious respiratory infection.
Okay.
You'll likely see birds struggling to breathe, often with their mouths open.
Okay.
And one of the things she points out is that stress can exacerbate respiratory problems.
Oh, interesting.
Maintaining a low-stress environment for your quail can go a long way in helping them stay healthy.
So things like minimizing disturbances and providing adequate space and ensuring they have a consistent routine.
Exactly. All those things can help.
Now, earlier we talked about salmonellosis
Mhm.
and how quail are somewhat resistant to it. Does she go into any more detail about that in her post?
Yes, she does. She reiterates that while salmonellosis is rare in quail, it's still possible for them to contract it. So practicing good hygiene, especially washing your hands thoroughly after handling your birds or their equipment, is still really important.
That's a good point.
Some diseases can be zoonotic, meaning they can be transmitted between animals and humans.
All right, so better safe than sorry. All right, so last but not least, ulcerative enteritis. What can you tell us about that?
Ulcerative enteritis is a bacterial disease that affects the intestines, and it can be fatal if left untreated.
Oh, wow.
One of the symptoms is bloody diarrhea,
Okay,
similar to coccidiosis.
gotcha.
And she highlights the importance of pest control in preventing ulcerative enteritis.
Right.
Rodents can carry the bacteria that cause this disease, so keeping your quail area rodent-free is crucial.
So protecting your quail's health isn't just about focusing on the birds themselves, it's about managing their entire environment.
Exactly. It's about the bigger picture.
All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from fungal infections to bacterial diseases, and even the importance of minimizing stress. What do you think are some of the most impactful takeaways from this deep dive into common quail diseases?
I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of prevention. Being proactive and creating a healthy environment for your quail is the best way to protect them from these diseases.
Absolutely. Vigilance, early detection, and biosecurity are key. We need to be observant and catch any signs of illness early on, and take steps to prevent these diseases from entering our flocks in the first place.
I agree. Knowledge is power.
Well said. And for anyone looking to dive deeper into this topic, I highly recommend checking out Jessica Knowles' blog post, Common Quail Diseases and How to Prevent Them. It's packed with information, and she even includes links to additional resources.
Yeah, it's a great starting point for any quail owner.
So that wraps up part 1 of our deep dive into common quail diseases. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll tackle some frequently asked questions from Jessica's blog post and explore some additional insights that can help you become a more informed and proactive quail owner.
Hey there, Quailcast listeners. We're so glad you're here with us today. Before we dive back into the conversation, we've got a quick ask for you. If you're loving the show, whether it's the stories, the insights, or just the vibe, we'd love your support to keep this podcast soaring. Here's how you can help. First, head over to Spotify or any other podcasting platform and hit that follow button on Quailcast. It's the easiest way to make sure you never miss an episode. Plus, it helps us grow and bring you even more of the content you love. And second, swing by our website at quailcast.com. That's quailcast.com. It's your one-stop shop for show notes, bonus content, and ways to connect with us. Your support means the world to us, and it's what keeps this little quail flock thriving. Thanks for being part of the Quailcast. Let's continue on to the podcast.
Welcome back to our deep dive on common quail diseases. We're moving on to the FAQ section of Jessica's blog post. These are always so helpful. It's like getting little bonus tips straight from the expert.
They can be really useful. And Jessica does a great job addressing some common questions that quail owners have. For example, one question that she tackles is whether quail can recover from respiratory infections without treatment.
Oh, that's a good question. I've wondered about that myself.
Yeah, it's a common concern. She points out that while some mild cases might resolve on their own with just supportive care,
Okay.
so things like warmth, a stress-free environment, maybe some electrolytes in their water.
Oh, wait.
More serious infections like quail bronchitis or Newcastle disease usually require more intervention,
Okay.
such as antibiotics that are prescribed by a veterinarian.
So you might be able to get away with just supportive care for a mild case, but for anything more serious, it's best to consult a vet.
Exactly.
Wow.
And sometimes it can be hard to tell if a disease is bacterial or viral just by looking at the symptoms.
Oh, yeah, that's true. They can be really similar.
They can.
Yeah.
But Jessica gives us a helpful clue. She says that bacterial infections often respond well to antibiotics, while viral diseases usually need supportive care to help the bird's immune system fight back.
So if you're unsure, it's always best to consult a vet.
Absolutely.
Speaking of prevention, one of the FAQs addresses how to protect your quail from diseases that are spread by wild birds. And that's something I personally struggle with a lot, because it's so hard to completely isolate them from wild birds.
It is. It's a challenge. But Jessica does offer some practical solutions. She recommends covering outdoor pens with wire mesh or netting to physically prevent wild birds from entering.
Okay.
And she also says that it's important to make sure that your feed and water sources are protected.
Right, to avoid contamination.
Yeah, you don't want wild birds, dropping anything into your quail's food or water.
Right, it's all about minimizing those points of contact where diseases can spread.
Exactly.
So I usually keep my quail in a covered enclosure. But they do have some outdoor time in a small run, so I think I'm going to have to rethink how I set that up to better protect them from wild birds.
Yeah, a few small changes can really make a big difference. While we all hope for the best, sometimes we have to face difficult situations. And Jessica actually addresses a question that no quail owner wants to think about but should be prepared for.
Oh, you mean when a quail dies suddenly?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
It is, but it happens. And Jessica's advice is spot on. She recommends having a necropsy performed by a veterinarian.
A necropsy. That's like an autopsy for animals, right?
That's right.
Okay.
It might seem unnecessary, especially if you've only lost one bird, but it can actually provide valuable information.
Well, how so?
Well, a necropsy can help identify the specific cause of death. If it was a disease, you can then take steps to prevent it from spreading to the rest of your flock.
Right.
Or it might reveal an underlying health issue that you weren't aware of, which allows you to provide better care for your remaining birds.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so knowledge is power, even when it comes from sad circumstances.
Yeah, that's true. And sometimes it can just offer peace of mind. Knowing why your quail died can help you make more informed decisions going forward. This whole deep dive has really highlighted the importance of being proactive when it comes to quail health.
I agree. It's not just about reacting to illness. It's about creating an environment that supports their well-being from the start.
Yeah, it's like a holistic approach to quail keeping.
Yeah.
By understanding the potential threats and taking those preventative measures, you're not just protecting your birds, you're setting them up for a long, healthy, and productive life.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the end of the frequently asked questions section.
Hey there, Quailcast listeners. We're so glad you're here with us today. Before we dive back into the conversation, we've got a quick ask for you. If you're loving the show, whether it's the stories, the insights, or just the vibe, we'd love your support to keep this podcast soaring. Here's how you can help. First, head over to Spotify or any other podcasting platform and hit that follow button on Quailcast. It's the easiest way to make sure you never miss an episode. Plus, it helps us grow and bring you even more of the content you love. And second, swing by our website at quailcast.com. That's quailcast.com. It's your one-stop shop for show notes, bonus content, and ways to connect with us. Your support means the world to us, and it's what keeps this little quail flock thriving. Thanks for being part of the Quailcast. Let's continue on to the podcast.
So we've covered the diseases, prevention tips, frequently asked questions, even a little bit about Jessica and her expertise. What would you say is the most important thing for quail owners to keep in mind?
I think the most important thing is to remember that knowledge is power. The more you learn about quail health, the better prepared you'll be to provide your birds with the best possible care. And remember, early detection is key. Pay close attention to your birds and don't hesitate to contact a veterinarian if you notice anything unusual.
Absolutely. And don't forget about biosecurity. It plays such a crucial role in preventing diseases from entering your flock in the first place. So we've covered a lot. What is the final thought you want to leave our listener with?
All right, so we're wrapping up our deep dive into common quail diseases.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting exploration.
It has. We've talked about the different types of diseases, their symptoms, preventative measures, biosecurity practices.
Yeah.
If you had to pick just one key takeaway for our listeners, what would it be?
That's a tough one. But I think I'd have to go with the idea that knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your bird's health.
I think that's a great takeaway. The more you know about potential threats, the better you can protect your birds.
Exactly.
And Jessica's blog post really is a great starting point. It is.
It covers so much. Those respiratory infections, digestive problems, even botulism.
And she doesn't just tell you what they are, she explains why they happen.
Right. And how to prevent them.
Exactly.
We talked about ventilation, dry bedding, hygiene, stress management.
All those things that contribute to a healthy covey.
And those specific tips, like using pine shavings and covering outdoor pens.
Those are really helpful.
So practical.
Yeah.
It's all about creating that safe and healthy environment.
Minimizing those risks.
Right. And, of course, if you see anything unusual with birds, don't wait to contact a vet.
Absolutely. Early detection is so important.
Better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah.
And speaking of resources, we've got to give Jessica another shout out.
Definitely.
Her blog post, Common Quail Diseases and How to Prevent Them. It's a must-read for any quail owner.
I agree. Well, now that you know more about common quail diseases and how to prevent them, I want to encourage you to really take a proactive approach to your flock's health. Maybe create a checklist for yourself based on everything we've talked about today.
Ooh, that's a good idea. So you don't miss anything.
Right. It's all about being prepared and staying vigilant.
Your quail are counting on you.
They are.
Well said. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into common quail diseases. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Quillcast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. If you loved what you heard, don't forget to visit us at quillcast.com. That's quillcast.com for the latest updates, show notes, and bonus content. And hey, if you haven't already, make sure to follow Quillcast on Spotify or your favorite podcast platform. It's the best way to stay in the loop and never miss an episode. Thanks again for being part of our community. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep soaring with Quillcast.